Our key international speaker today, you would have read her brief biography in the symposium program. Our international speaker comes from Ontario, speaks about 4.5 languages, English, Spanish, French, a little bit of Catalan and a little bit of Portuguese and a bit of mishmash, has travelled widely and worked widely in Latin America and around the world, and comes with a deep body of knowledge and insight about parent engagement as a policy and practice lever. So I welcome you, Hélène. You will be speaking across the 2 days, and we look forward to drawing as much as we can out of your repository of knowledge. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Kes. I also want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. And I'm so pleased to be here and to be here for those 2 days to hear this conversation that you're going to have about parent and family engagement. I'd like to start this address with 2 quotes that I find that speak to me, and I think you might be familiar with the first one. I'm just offering these as potential aspirations that you can consider as you're discussing family engagement over the next couple of days. The first one is from Heather Weiss, who's a researcher at Harvard, and she says that family engagement must be a systemic, integrated, and sustained approach, and she invites us to move beyond random acts of family engagement. And then Susan Auerbach, who's a professor in California, she writes about authentic partnerships. And she says that they're respectful alliances among educators, families, and community groups that value relationship building, dialogue, and power sharing as part of socially just democratic school. And I happen to share this vision of socially just, equitable, and participatory schools, as I'm sure many of you do. And as a policy advisor with an interest in policy as a tool for social or systemic change, these quotes lead me to 3 different questions. The first one is, under what conditions would authentic partnerships between home and school become typical rather than random or exceptional? And then how can we enable and contribute to building a culture in which educators see parents as partners and parents feel welcome? And then what is the role of policy in cultivating these sorts of beliefs and in fostering relational trust and power sharing? So how can policy contribute to creating the conditions for those relationships to flourish? I know that many of you are interested in knowing what has been done in Ontario from a policy perspective. And so I will be sharing that with you today and putting that into the context of the educational reform that's been happening in Ontario. So I'll share both what the policy is and other related policies, and as well as the process that we went through to develop those policies. And just to clarify, I was with the Ministry of Education's Parent Engagement Office from 2006 to 2008. I'm still with the ministry, but in a different part of it. So I was with the office at the beginning, during the first couple of years. So I'll be able to speak to the early development, but I was not there. I was not part of the office when the policy was actually put in place. So the perspective that I provide is not fully that of an insider. So I just want to clarify that I'm not speaking officially on behalf of the ministry, but sharing my own perspective on the development. So I'll share some of the key elements of the policy, the vision, the key strategies, and the actions, as well as some of the tools for monitoring that have been put in place. And then I want to come back to those questions that I posed and reflect on some of the challenges and just give you some food for thought for the next couple of days. So before I go into the development of the policy itself, I just want to put that into the context of Ontario, just in case you're not familiar with that context. as Ontario is is Canada's most populous province, and it's home to its largest and most diverse city, Toronto. There's approximately 2 million students in the education system, in the public education system in Ontario, in about 5,000 schools. About 95% of those students are in English language schools, and the other 5% in French language schools. And Ontario also funds Catholic schools, like in Australia, but not private schools. And the schools are administered by district school boards. There are 72 of them, so there's some English and some French language ones, and a few school authorities, 11 school authorities, which are smaller than the district school boards. And aside from being the province where I happen to live and work and being the only province I can really speak to, I think there's other good reasons to pay attention to Ontario. You may be familiar with the McKinsey report that talked about Ontario as one of a small number of jurisdictions worldwide that's made significant, widespread, and sustained improvements in student achievement. And they said that we moved from good to great from 2003 to 2009 approximately, and now we're moving from great to excellent. There's also the OECD latest report that also talks about Ontario's emphasis on achievement and how we've sustained good improvements over the last few years in literacy and numeracy and graduation rates, and also in reducing the number of low-performing schools. And the results in Ontario are also more equitable than in many other places. So the difference in achievement between our highest socioeconomic quarter and the lowest is about half the average of the OECD. And likewise for the difference between first-generation immigrants and non-immigrants to Ontario is also about half the OECD average. But that doesn't mean that all is well. There's still a lot of improvements, that need to be made in Ontario as well. We still have gaps, especially for our Aboriginal students, also for special needs students, and some groups of immigrants. Excuse me. So there's definitely room for improvement, but I think Ontario is fairly proud of the work that's been done, and I've inquired into the secret of its success, and it's not so much as a secret because it's been home to a fairly well-documented, high-profile reform, and one of the reasons that's been put forward for the success includes the sustained political leadership. We've had a Premier, Dawson McKindy, who's been in power since 2003, and it was part of his platform to have a strong education strategy, and he developed it in partnership with Michael Fullan, who's the lead school reform researchers. And Michael Fullan, who's been the special advisor to McGuinty, has also recruited Ben Levin, who some of you might know as well, who was our deputy minister for several years and was one of the key architects of our reform. And Ben Levin is no longer the deputy minister, but he's still a professor in Toronto and still works closely with the ministry. And I know he was just here in Australia in March, so perhaps some of you got to see him. So some of the key elements of his reform are here. He talks about how you can't make changes to the system, or you have to engage people, the stakeholders, and really garner their support and energy and motivation. And so his first key element is that you need to have a plan that focuses on improved student outcomes and is founded on the best available evidence. And you have to implement that plan in a careful but relentless way, and then create real buy-in by paying careful attention to two-way communications and taking very seriously the ideas and views of stakeholders. So that's worth opening a parenthesis here, I think, because this one is particularly relevant to parent engagement. He's created, it was important to him to have vehicles for parent voice at the district and provincial level. And then this other key element was to manage distractions and competing pressures so that there's sustained attention and focus on a small number of goals. And in Ontario, those goals, there's 3 of them that we've been focused on since 2003, and they're high levels of student achievement, reduced gaps in student achievement, and high levels of public confidence in the public education system. In the early days of the Parent Engagement Office, as a senior policy advisor, a lot of my time was spent looking for evidence linking family engagement to our 3 ministry goals. And I'm sure all of you here are already familiar with the evidence that links family engagement with student achievement and various education outcomes. But just in terms of what makes the most difference in terms of achievement, it's the things that are directly linked to student learning. It's creating the expectations, the attitudes, or creating an educationally oriented ambiance at school and at home. And then in terms of reducing the achievement gap, Janes, who did a meta-analysis, talks about how parental involvement enjoys an influence that largely transcends differences in socioeconomic status, race, and other factors. And that that's promising, because that means that by engaging families, there's potential to reduce the achievement gap, which I know is really important to you here as well in Australia. Okay. And then, let me see. In terms of our other goal, raising public confidence, there isn't quite as much that's written in the literature about that, but in Ontario we've had a couple of studies that have provided some evidence of that as well. So for example, there's a study by Moore and Lasky that found that schools that work well with families have improved teacher-staff morale and higher ratings of teachers by parents. And Anderson and Mapp, who've done their work in the US, also say that when schools work effectively with families to develop their connections, that families become powerful allies of the schools and advocates for public education. And as I said, our deputy minister also believed in strong two-way communication and in making information transparent to parents and putting in place vehicles for them to express their voice and engage with the education system. So all of that, we think, contribute to raising public confidence in the system. Oops, sorry. So I want to give you a little bit of the historical context in the development of the policy. So even though there's been more of a push in recent years, parent engagement is not new. We had, through Bill 82, the establishment of Special Education Advisory Committee back in 1980. So those are committees on which there should be parents that represent the interests of students with special education needs. And then in 1997, school councils were legislated. So school boards and principals were required to solicit input from school councils. Then soon after the Liberal government was elected, they put in place a project called the Parent Voice in Education Project. That was a group of parent leaders from across the province that was constituted to give advice to the minister on issues of parent engagement. And they developed a discussion paper which they circulated widely, and they did consultations across the province, and then gave recommendations to the minister. And there were 3 key areas where they said that parents wanted to see actions taken. One of them was to see the parent voice empowered within the education system, the system transformed so that it would be more welcoming and inclusive for parents, and then they wanted the differences among Ontario's diverse communities to be recognized and addressed. And then, the minister, it was Minister Jared Kennedy at the time, he responded to that with a discussion paper that came out in December 2005 and that we used to refer to as our parent involvement policy. So even though it hadn't gone through the process of becoming an actual policy, it was really just a discussion paper, but it included a lot of strategies that were implemented soon after the paper came out. And so those were the key elements of that paper, and it really became a blueprint for what became later the policy. So the one key thing was the establishment of a parent engagement office out of the Ministry of Education, and that office, I think, plays a role similar to the Bureau here, where it provides guidance and research on parent engagement and tries to support the province capacity to create the conditions for parent engagement in the province. And then we also have education officers who are based in our regional offices. So they're field officers that play a bridge role between the parent engagement office and the school boards. Then at the district level, school boards were asked to create parent involvement committees that act as a link between the board and the school councils, and just try to also build capacity within their schools for parent engagement. And then the school councils, as you know, were already in place, but they were asked at that time to play more of a role in promoting parent engagement as well, because before many of them were focusing more on fundraising or other types of activities. And then at the provincial level, there was a provincial parent board that was put in place, and that mandate was to advise the minister on matters related to parent engagement, and they spend a lot of time sort of advising on the development of these different initiatives. And however, the board was put in place in 2007, and then in 2009 a decision was made to dissolve it, even though it had contributed a lot. But the ministry decided that it was better to focus its effort on more of a grassroots level and really I encouraged and mandate. They ended up legislating the parent involvement committees at the district level, and they felt that was a better place to effect change. But then the parent voice was still included. It continues to be included on many parent bodies at the provincial, not parent bodies, like general tables at the ministry. So, for example, there's a student achievement working table. There's an education partnership table that includes a representative from parents' organization as well as other stakeholders like teachers, principals, superintendents. So that continues to this day. And then that paper also acknowledged the importance of providing funding to support parent engagement. So there was some base funding provided to parent involvement committees at the board level, as well as to school councils and to 4 provincial parent associations. And then there was also a grant program that was created called the Parents Reaching Out Grants, and that includes 2 types of grants. One is at the school level, so school councils can apply, only school councils are eligible. They can apply for a grant of up to $1,000 to do a project to remove barriers to parent engagement in their schools. And then there's also another grant that's larger, of up to $30,000, and that one is for regional and provincial level projects. And those ones, different organizations can apply, not-for-profit organizations, school boards, even universities can apply for those. I mentioned, the last little thing at the end is the Parent Resource website that was also part of that policy document or that discussion paper, that we would create more tools and resources for parents. So there's a website that was created that's called ABC123. And then, so I mentioned that we provide funding to 4 parent associations. There's one that's a Catholic Parent Association, one is a French parent organization, there's a Home and School Association, and this one is called People for Education. And it's an organization that promotes public education. I would say that the most vocal and visible of the 4 associations. And they're really effective in communicating. Actually, they're faster often for communicating information from the ministry to the field than the ministry is. So they also, the other way around as well, they collect information from parents and give it to the ministry. So they have an annual survey of school councils and produce an annual report. And as you can see on the right-hand side there, they also have Facebook and Twitter and communicate with parents in all sorts of ways. Okay. Aside from engaging parents, we also felt, as we were developing policy and trying to advance the field, we felt it was important to also create relationships and engage the research community. At the time, there was very little research done in Ontario about parent engagement. Most of it was from the US. So I remember meeting with the deans of the faculties of education to start to seed some research questions and encourage research on parent engagement in the province. And then we also there's a symposium that happens annually in Ontario. It's called the Ontario Education Research Symposium. That brings together researchers from universities, school boards, and the ministry. And so we try to use that symposium also to promote the field of parent engagement. And so one year we had Debbie Pusher come and do a state of the field, or present a state of the field review that she did for us. And then the following year we organized a panel bringing together practitioners and researchers. And I just want to mention that I think some of you might be familiar with Debbie Pusher's work. I don't know how yeah, you are. I don't know how well known it is here in Australia, sorry. But her perspective is that she makes a difference between parent involvement and parent engagement. She talks about how in schools often we invite parents, but based on what the schools want, we invite them to our space. But she says that instead we need to sort of flatten the structure of school and share power, and that we need to create a place that's owned as much by parents and students as it is by educators and administrators. And of course, the parents who heard her at the symposium really loved her perspective. And even though I would say there was some resistance to it, she became sort of the guru of parent engagement in Ontario. And every time there's a conference organized by parents, they invite her. And so I think she's been really influential in shifting the language in Ontario from parent involvement to parent engagement. And then there's been more research done since. We also commissioned a literature review by Ken Leetwood that was more focused on the skills, attributes, attitudes, behaviors, and the contextual factors as well that are conducive to parent engagement. And then that was followed by consultations with parents, principals, and teachers to get their perspective on the same questions. And since then, the Parent Engagement Office has done multiple consultations every time that they develop a policy or a tool, a resource. It's always done in consultation with parents. Then the other relationships we had to build was within the ministry itself. And in the early days, we created a cross-ministry committee that would bring together people from different branches in the Ministry of Education to help people think about connections and think about how parent engagement really is relevant to everything that the ministry does, from curriculum to teaching or instructional practices and healthy schools, safe schools, all of these things. And this is not a full list, but it just gives you an idea of the connections. And I don't think that that this committee still exists, but I think it's become more natural now for people in the ministry to think about parents and whatever they're developing, think about consulting parents. And there's examples here that I've brought with me of resources that were developed. Like this one is on bullying for parents. I've got another one on kindergarten for parents. So all of these different branches have produced resources, and I'm going to put them out there during the break, and you can take a look if you'd like. Then I think a key milestone in Ontario was the development or the creation, first of all, of the inclusive education branch in the ministry in 2009. And the Parent Engagement Office was moved from what was then the Field Services branch to the Inclusive Education branch. And then an equity and inclusive education strategy was put in place in 2009. The strategy sets out a vision of education in which all students, parents, and other members of the school community feel welcome and respected. It provides a framework that educators can use to identify and remove discriminatory barriers and systemic barriers so that all students can achieve their potential. And then together with this strategy, so I also have a copy of this strategy here. There's also another similar document that provides guideline, and then there was a policy program memorandum that provides that requires school boards to establish policies in their own district about inclusive education. And there's 8 sort of areas that they have to address within their policies, and one of those is school community relations. And they also have a number of principles that their policies should adhere to. And again, one of those is that it should involve the broader school community. And then soon after that, in 2009, again, we had the parent involvement committees were mandated. So before, in the earlier discussion paper, I mentioned that the school boards were encouraged, but by then they were required to establish the parent involvement committees. And I'll tell you a little bit more about those tomorrow, but they're composed of parents. The majority of members are parents, and they are chaired or co-chaired by parents. But the director of education, which is the director of the school board, also participates as a non-voting member, and is also trustee, an elected trustee who participates as a non-voting member as well. And then in 2010, we finally got our real parent engagement policy, which is called Parents in Partnership, a Parent Engagement Policy for Ontario Schools. That policy formally recognizes and supports the vision of our schools as places of partnership and respect, where every parent feels included. And this is the vision it articulates in more details. So all partners acknowledge the positive impact of parent engagement on student achievement. Students are supported and inspired to learn in a culture of high expectations, in which parents are welcome, respected, and valued by the school community as partners in children's learning and development, have opportunities to be involved, and also a full range of choices about how to be involved in the educational community. So that one was a key piece. They wanted them to have a full range of choices, not just a few, all kinds of ways that they can be engaged. And then they're engaged through ongoing communication and dialogue with other education partners to support a positive learning environment at home and at school. And they're supported with the information and tools to participate in school. The policy was also designed to promote exemplary practices, and I've got the policy here with me as well, and you'll see as you go through it, there's all these little text boxes in there, and these are examples that were collected from across the province, from schools or school boards or community organizations. So they've really tried to highlight the positive things that are already happening in Ontario. So those are the 4 strategies. The first one, they're really just the broad goals, really, and for each of those goals, they've provided examples. So the first one is around school climate. The first strategy is to foster and sustain a positive, welcoming school climate in which all parents' perspectives are encouraged, valued, and heard. So these are examples of things that are already happening. So the first one, the Ontario Leadership Framework, is a framework that contains leadership competencies that are soon to be renamed resources, but they're competencies that leaders need in their school, not just about parent engagement, but part of those competencies are around building collaborative cultures and building partnerships and having difficult conversations with people, facilitating dialogues in their school. Then the new teacher induction program includes some resources to help teachers communicate with parents. Then that policy statement is mainly focused on welcoming students and families in French language schools. And then we have a safe school strategy that requires schools to have a safe school action team that includes parents and community members. And also it requires schools to conduct school climate surveys, and then the results are fed back to the school community. Then the second strategy is about eliminating barriers. So identify and remove barriers to parent engagement that may prevent some parents from fully participating in their children's learning, and to reflect the diversity of our students and communities. So again, these are just examples that are listed. There are many others, but the Parents Reaching Out grants that I mentioned earlier, those are focused on removing barriers. I already mentioned the equity and inclusive education strategy. Also, we have a First Nation, Métis, and Inuit education policy framework, and that one also has as its starting point dialogue and respect and for communities. And then the community use of school program is a program that's more focused on removing barriers to the use of school facilities by community groups. Then the third strategy is to provide parents with the knowledge, skills, and tools they need to support student learning at home and at school. So again, there's the ministry website. There's all kinds of resources. Got another one here called Parents. That was the French site. Everything is at least bilingual. Parents Matter. But it's also been translated into several languages. The website also has, all kinds of tip sheets in multiple languages. There's fact sheets, video podcast. You'll see some more of those resources out there at the break. And the special education branch also developed a guide to resolving conflicts among parents in schools. And then the last strategy is around parent outreach. So it's to review and expand communication and outreach strategies such as local workshops, presentations, tools, and resources to share information and strategies related to supporting learning at home and parent engagement in schools. So again, these are all things that existed at the time of the policy being put in place. The Parenting and Family Literacy Centers are, I think, a great program, which I'm going to tell you more about tomorrow morning. The Politique d'aménagement linguistique is a policy to promote French language and culture through schools. So that also inevitably has to engage communities. And then the Parents Reaching Out grants, again, are used very often for workshops and those types of outreach activities. So after outlining those 4 strategies, the policy then ends with a list of actions that should be taken at the school, board, and the ministry level. And really, it's a long list, almost like a laundry list of actions that are at different levels. So there's 15 school actions, and there are 19 board actions, and 23 ministry actions. And some of them are very broad, some of them are very specific. So just to give you just a couple examples from ministry level actions, one is to value the contribution and perspectives of parent organizations and groups, as well as individual parents. So that one's quite broad. And then we have another one that's improved timelines for the flowing of the Parents Reaching Out grants so that it works better with the timeline of the school year. And that was a recommendation that the Provincial Parent Board gave. And that was implemented quite quickly. And then these actions, as I said, are not really organized in any way, but I've just tried to create categories of the ministry actions that need to be taken. So one is to seek parent input, expand communication with parents, provide training and develop resources and tools to foster parent engagement, clarify the role of parent committees, create networking opportunities and facilitate the sharing of best practices, provide financial support, and make adjustments where needed, and then expand what's good and as much as possible. And one thing, though, that I did not see or that's not currently in the list of ministry action is around monitoring and evaluation. And I asked the Parent Engagement Office about that because I was surprised there was nothing about sort of accountability in there. And they said that in the draft of the policy, there was a whole section on monitoring, but that parents felt uncomfortable with it, and they decided to remove it from the policy itself, and instead created other tools outside of the policy to support schools in doing their own self-assessment. But these were the only actions related to monitoring that I found in the policy. So one is the schools that should monitor school climate to help identify barriers to parent involvement or issues that should be addressed in order to foster and support a safe and welcoming learning environment, and then review their self-assessment processes to determine the effectiveness of their parent engagement activities. And then the boards should also monitor parent engagement in ways that support and foster student learning and achievement, and communicate their progress on parent engagement to the local community, including educators, parents, and the public. So I think this is in line, though, with Ontario's sort of approach, where it's not a punitive approach, but it's about providing support and guidance. So the schools and school boards are required to communicate back to their communities, that they're accountable to their communities, but there's not a lot of requirement to report back to the ministry itself, other than if schools get or school board get a Parents Reaching Out grant, a particular piece of funding, then they have to report back on that funding. And then, as I said, there are tools that have been created. This one is called the School Effectiveness Framework. That was created by a different part of the ministry, the Literacy and Numeracy Secretariat, around the same time that the policy was developed. And it's really meant as a self-assessment tool for schools. I'm not going to go into the details, but you can see that at the center of it is the student, the heart of the framework. And then that yellow layer has 6 essential components that schools should be monitoring about themselves. And so there's things like student voice and the curriculum, assessment practices, and then home at the bottom right, homeschool and community partnership is part of that. So for each of these 6 essential components, there are a list of indicators that are provided for schools to use. So this is a pretty dense slide. I just wanted to give you an idea of the number of indicate or of elements of look-fors that you can look at in each of the indicators. So the first indicator is the school council has a meaningful role in supporting learning and achievement for students. And then, so those look-fors, if you will, are at the school classroom and student level. So at the school level, for example, the first one is the school council in partnership with staff consults with and assists the parent community to become familiar with current issues and information. At the classroom level, the school council identifies and works with staff to address barriers to parent engagement, and then the student recognizes and values the contributions of parents and community members. And then the second indicator is students, parents, and community members are engaged and welcome as respected and valued partners. So again, for this one, there's a list of things to look for at the school, classroom, and student level. The third is the school and community build partnerships to enhance learning opportunities for students. And the fourth is learning opportunities, resources, and supports are provided to help parents support student learning and have productive parent-teacher student conversations. And then there's another tool that's been created more recently that just came out in 2011, and it's a School Administrator's Guide to Parent Engagement. So that one helps school administrators, principals to use the school effectiveness framework and also to develop their own indicators that are relevant to their own context. And this, the school effectiveness framework, I should say, is really intended to be a self-assessment piece that promotes dialogue. So it's not a punitive thing either, and it's used sometimes. It can be used through the board improvement planning process. And there are teams from the ministry that will meet with boards to discuss progress and provide feedback. But it's always in the spirit of continuous improvement and just providing positive feedback. Okay, oops. Then, so now that I've shared, I think, pretty much all I know about the parent engagement policy, I just wanted to go back to my earlier questions that I raised at the beginning and ask, does the parents as partner or the parent engagement policy help create the conditions under which authentic partnerships can flourish? And I think it does put several important elements in place. So there's the sharing of effective practices, there's some funding to support parent engagement, there's capacity building, and then vehicles for parent voice. And there isn't much, however, about monitoring and accountability or evaluation, but that, as I said, it's provided in other resources outside of the policy. But I must say that I wonder sometimes if the carrots that are attached to the policy, so whether it's the funding for parent involvement committees or the possibility of applying for parents reaching out grants, is that sufficiently appetizing for school districts to want to do the hard work of developing positive relationship where perhaps there's been mostly mistrust before? And fair enough, that might not be the right question to ask, because if school districts are engaging parents because they're looking for a carrot, then they might not be genuinely interested in or believe in what parents have to contribute. But I think it's important in developing policy to promote parent and community engagement to think about those accountability measures that are in place. Because as you know, creating authentic partnerships and trusting partnerships takes a long time. You really have to take the time to build the trust, to develop a common language, a common understanding of what you're trying to achieve together. And I think when it's principals that are ultimately accountable for showing results, and when there's pressure to show results, usually achievement-related results, often in Ontario it's literacy and numeracy results, then are they truly able to engage the community and really have genuine interest in their goals and interests? And so there might be pressures, I think, in some contexts that might require principal to set limit to community participation and see. Sometimes they'll see it as a distractor. So reporting timelines, for example, might not align with the time that it takes to build relationships. And then another thing that I've wondered about is the absence of explicit attention to reducing deficit thinking in the policy. And I think partly that's intentional because Ontario has wanted to take a very positive approach and highlight the good things that are happening. But I think there's a lot more attention in the policy to building the capacity of parents than to building the capacity of teachers and administrators. And granted, there are tools and there are things that have happened outside of the policy, professional development and that have been put in place, but really the focus is, I see it as more on what parents need to be engaged. But I think that true partnerships really require a shift in thinking, in mental models around parent engagement. Often we think about parents through a deficit lens too often, about, we might see it negatively, what parents don't do or think that parents don't care, when in fact most parents really do care, and perhaps they don't feel invited or welcome into the schools. So I think we need to do a bit more self-reflection as educators and policy advisors, look in the mirror a little bit and look at our own biases. And I still don't know what's the best way for policy to change those those attitudes of educators. And what's the best moment? Is it when they're studying to become teachers, when they're still fresh and we can influence their attitudes, but then they get into a system where ways of doing are pretty ingrained and there's teachers and principals with more power than they do. So we also need to think about where's the best place to kind of leverage the change within the system. But then going back to Ben Levin's lesson about changing practice, I'm reminded that blaming doesn't work. So and at the core of his approach is really a sustained effort at supporting teachers, helping teachers and educators do their job better. And I know that in the Student Achievement Division, a lot of work has been done around creating professional learning communities, networking. A lot of collaborative inquiry is happening in Ontario. Mentoring relationships, so all kinds of things that I think have really made a difference in improving instructional practice. So I think why not use these kinds of models to also help teachers become better at engaging parents and providing a lot of feedback for that. And I also think that we need to harness teachers' leadership and empower them and give them agency, because in contexts where teachers might feel under the scrutiny of principals or of the state or their school board, they're not likely to really engage in true partnerships. And there's been some research done by Anderson, I think in the US, where she said that in schools where principals were more top-down or control-oriented, teachers often responded to this with defensiveness, and it made authentic participation nearly impossible. So I think in a participatory context, you're looking for leadership that's collaborative and distributive, and teachers have to be able to exert their leadership as well, because they're best situated often to see how learning opportunities can be enriched and how the needs of students can be supported through school community partnerships. And the last question I had was around whether sometimes I wonder if our policy is too instrumentalist and that it's really focused on student achievement goals, although now we're also talking about well-being, not just student achievement, but student achievement and well-being. So is it just too focused on that rather than about building a socially just democratic society? And I think often there are writers that see those goals as opposed and mutually exclusive, but I really don't think they're necessarily at odds with each other. So for example, a community that's disadvantaged might have community revitalization as a first priority, and that may be required. You have to pay attention to that if you're going to be able to support your students that are from lower socioeconomic background. If you're going to close the gap, you might need to pay attention to that first. So I think it's possible to work on both at the same time. So I raised all of these questions not to sort of be critical necessarily of Ontario, because I think a lot of good work has been done, but I just wanted to sort of push the thinking a little bit and try to stimulate conversation and give you some food for thought for the next couple of days. And I want to thank the Bureau for inviting me. I'm really delighted to be here, and I look forward to hearing your conversations over the next couple of days. And do we have a few minutes for questions? I think, yeah, we do. Questions or reflections? I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you. I'll be around for the next 2 days, so I'm happy to have one-on-one conversations as well. Yeah?
I'm just wondering hi, Helen. Matt Davies from the Department of Education here in Canberra. I'm just wondering, in terms of the expectations placed on school leaders and the performance regime that applies to school leaders, to what extent, if any, are expectations crystal clear about their leadership of parent engagement, and how is that expressed in their employment, performance agreements, etc.?
Yeah.
It seems to me creating demand of school leaders to genuinely engage with parents is critical. And while I recognise, genuine usually means they want to do it, but there are stimuli that affect what we care about, and I'm wondering whether school leaders are required, and if there's a mechanism for them to have their performance assessed against the degree to which they create a culture of parent engagement.
I don't think there's a requirement per se. There's the framework that's used to guide principals and to facilitate conversations around performance as well. But it's not necessarily a requirement that they're assessed against. But they have district reviews where school board teams go also into the schools and spend time observing the principal, the school teachers, and what happens around the school, and then provide feedback on those areas. But that's a really important thing to think about, I think. And I actually don't know the details. I could probably talk to our leadership development branch and get some of the appraisal guidelines that they have. That if you're interested, I could share that with you after.
Helene, thank you. Terrific achievement in Ontario. I was interested in how the focus on parent engagement has driven down to engagement with parents who are not normally engaged, the disengaged parents, the ones who don't join the parent bodies and the rest of it.
Actually, tomorrow I'm going to give some specific examples on the ground, and I've tried to pick some that have that are in communities that face more barriers. So I'll address some of that tomorrow. But the parents reaching out grants, for example, have been one thing that's been used to reach out to parents. So through multilingual materials, or sometimes they're used to do events in outside of the school, like going to the community to really talk to parents that might not be comfortable coming to the school. So those are all kinds of ways that the grants have been used, and I can certainly share more tomorrow about that. Yeah. There was another question. I think, okay.
Peter Carney, I'm from Hagley Farm School. I have just finished as a principal. I am terrified by lists of things I will do.
By the list of things you will do? I am terrified
by the lists coming down the line of things you will do, whereas I'm not at all terrified with having amazingly wonderful interactions with parents. And it seems to me that the last question that you asked, which is almost like student achievement goals versus, I know you didn't say that, social justice and democratic goals, it seems to me that the middle point in that is the creating of the community of which the school is a part. Now, I'm really concerned that lots of interactive assessments around principals and schools actually makes it very difficult to do the parent engagement exercise. So I wondered if you'd talk about the ways of leveraging better ways of actually managing a school faced with unbelievable numbers of demands, many of which are contradictory and many of which are unachievable.
Yeah, I think managing those distraction was one of the things that Ben Levin spoke about, and so he really talked about having the relentless focus on those goals. But I think if you take a whole sort of a holistic approach and think about how these other things impact on the students' capacity to do well in school. Like they have to, their basic needs have to be met, right, in order to do well in school. So then that makes all kinds of other things relevant, like nutrition programs, well-being, or physical activity. All of those things are important. So I think perhaps the idea is to work as much as possible with community agencies and leverage the services and the supports that exist in the community, not necessarily creating more work for yourself as a principal, but really building. And I'm talking I'm not an experienced principal myself, but I think creating those, really building those relationships and letting the teachers really develop those relationships and putting in place the different supports that the student needs to succeed, I think all contributes, to those achievement goals. But I think that's a really important point that you raised. That hopefully that's something that I'll continue to talk about this weekend.
Thank you, Elaine, for a comprehensive description of what's happening in Ontario.
You're welcome.
My question is with respect to a distance education culture and secondly a homeschooling culture in Ontario. Would you mind making a few comments about that with respect to parent engagement, please?
I actually don't know very much about that. There's not I don't think that distance education is that developed in Ontario at the elementary and secondary school levels. More at the post-secondary level. There are some district school boards that are starting to use it more, and certainly that would you would have to engage parents in a very different way, using probably telecommunication, or because I know that some boards are huge in Ontario, especially some of the French language boards, because the French language populations are not sort of concentrated, so they're really spread out, and so they face particular challenges to engaging parents, and transportation being one of them, especially for engaging parents also in like, for example, parent involvement committees, or those things that are more centralized. But there's still a lot that can be done for building the culture of learning and creating high expectations and all of that in the home, right? But I probably have to use a lot more of internet video conferencing or whatever the technology is available in that context to have conversations with parents, and invite them as much as possible as well to the school. Yeah.